has been taught for 2,000 years. People are converting to or remaining within, with a clear conscience, the Catholic faith. I am genuinely troubled by the fact that Mr. White seems, and I stress the word seems, and I'm willing to be shown to be wrong, seems at times in his argumentation to not be a man who is even opening up his mind enough to consider even the remote possibility that this might be true. He seems to launch into a debate mode that says, this can't be true, and I'm going to scour the Fathers to find everything that I can to stack up against the Catholic position. And perhaps not really wrestle in prayer and openness before the Lord with those passages which do seem to argue for the Catholic position, both in Scripture and in the Church Fathers. I ask him to be open-minded, and I ask him to pray for me, that I can always be an open-minded person. I want to tell you something as God is my witness right now. You can dismiss me as a liar if you wish. I have no way of proving this. I can't show you my heart. But before every one of these debates, I literally set aside my commitment to the Catholic position. And I re-examine the evidence with as much objectivity as possible. I decide ahead of time I do not want to come and debate and defend this doctrine unless I really honestly believe it can be defended from Scripture and from the witness of church history. I don't come here with a pre-commitment to defend this. I sit in the Protestant's place. I stand in the Protestant's shoes, and I look at the evidence. And I say, can this persuade me all over again? Can it reconvert me all over again to the Catholic position? And I have to tell you that the answer has been yes, in debate after debate after debate. That doesn't prove anything. But I simply present it to you as an attitude, by the grace of God, because I claim no virtue in myself, an attitude that all of us should have, to really be willing to listen carefully and closely. I believe that Mr. White has quoted the Church Fathers out of context, and he's absolutely right. The only way that you'll be able to know that is not by believing what I say. I don't expect you to believe or follow anything simply because I say it. It's for you to do the homework yourself. I believe that it's possible to prove anything from the Church Fathers, just like it's possible, if you really want to prove almost any kind of error from the Scriptures themselves. You yourselves, even if you lay aside the Protestant-Catholic differences, are well aware that there are other groups out there that claim to base their theology upon the Bible, and they'll quote the Bible to support all kinds of things. So the Bible can be abused. It can be misinterpreted if we don't approach it with a completely honest, intellectually honest, and open-minded attitude. Church Fathers and church history itself can be abused in the same way. I believe that fallacious inferences have been drawn from statements of the Church Fathers. I believe that Mr. White has falsely defined the task at hand and the burden of proof, saying that if Roman Catholicism is true, then we shall find, these are his words, quote, all the necessary elements of the doctrine of papacy in all the fathers who write on this issue. The Church has never claimed that. Has never said that every father must write an exhaustive treatise upon this. You may find one aspect of the truth of the papacy defended by a church father, that, for example, Peter is the rock, even though that same church father may err in his understanding of a particular aspect of papal authority. You might find another church father who understands that there are successors to the apostles. And with all due respect to Mr. White, I have to vigorously contest his statement that, hey, I believe in apostolic succession. Anyone who believes what the apostles taught is a successor of the apostles. It's a succession of doctrine only. My friends, if we can redefine our terms, then we can all believe. That's like people saying, I believe in the deity of Christ because he was a wonderful man and God was really present in this loving manner. I believe in the resurrection even though they believe the bones of Jesus are still moldering in the grave. That is not apostolic succession. It is a succession of office that Irenaeus is speaking about. He's talking about apostles appointing a certain individual, not simply saying, any of you out there who believe what I preached, as you believe that you're faithful, it's up to you to decide, then you can consider yourself in the apostolic succession. They're talking about office bearers. They're talking about bishops. And that this is an office established by the apostles to preserve the government of the church. And one of those bishops is the Bishop of Rome. If that's what the apostles did, my friends, if they appointed a bishops and commanded, as Paul commanded Timothy and Titus, to exercise that authority and to let no one, as he says to Timothy, gainsay what you teach, what I taught you, then woe to that person today who rejects the authority of the successors of the apostles, because in doing that they reject the apostles, and in doing that reject the authority of Christ, and in rejecting the authority of Christ, reject the authority of God who sent him. I agree with Mr. White that the issue is momentous. This is not some minor slip-up. We are either seriously in error in listening to the Pope as any kind of authentic and trustworthy proclaimer of what Jesus intends his people to believe and how to live today. We are either blasphemous in attributing to this man a role as a vicar of Christ, or we are grossly negligent in cutting ourselves off from this resource, if in fact Jesus has given us the papacy as a gift to the church, to guide it in controversy after controversy. When Vatican I speaks of the ancient and constant faith of the church, it doesn't mean that everyone out there is always going to be Orthodox all the time. Mr. White's own position doesn't believe that, even the Protestant position. And I find it, therefore, very intellectually much a shell game for him to say, because there are church fathers who don't subscribe to what Vatican I said, therefore the claim falls to the ground. Mr. White believes that it's the constant and ancient teaching of the church that we're justified by faith alone, a heresy condemned by the Council of Trent, or that Scripture alone is the infallible rule of faith and practice. But Mr. White's own scenario of church history would admit that through great ages, for even a millennium and longer, that these truths were virtually obscured in the vast majority of the church, and only retained by a remnant. Would it be fair for me to say, Mr. White, therefore these doctrines cannot be true, because you have so many great church doctors and fathers denying them? Mr. White isn't being fair. And more importantly, he isn't being intellectually honest in stating the case that way. People can dispute the teaching of the church. That dispute can be enormous and widespread. But it doesn't detract from the claim that nonetheless the true position, even if held by a minority, is the constant and faithful teaching and ancient teaching of the church. The church at Rome, for example, as these early fathers which I quoted, remained steadfast in these doctrines. The church at Rome was not guilty of the error that Cyprian was in saying that the baptism of heretics is thereby rendered invalid. And over again, you see what Ignatius said about the Church of Rome, and what Irenaeus said, that it's removed from any blemish of heresy, authenticated again and again. Another convert, Ronald Knox, an Anglican, in his Spiritual Aeneid, pointed this out, that as he studied church history, that over and over again, when there were controversies, that the Church of Rome always anticipated the judgment of councils and other fathers on the extent of the canon, and on issues such as baptism and so forth. That is where we find the ancient and constant faith of the church, preserved in Rome. That's what Irenaeus said. Other churches may err, other church fathers may err. Protestant denominations